So the U.S. government is still shut down, which means millions of Americans are going without pay while Congress is on vacation at the moment until August 14th. That's the House. The House is on recess. So millions of Americans are without pay. Many are being furloughed. There's discussions of cutting them entirely and people losing their jobs. And the truth about government shutdowns should absolutely enrage you, because once I walk you through how ridiculous and how totally unnecessary this is, how they literally at any minute could decide not to do a shutdown, and it's not for the reasons you think. The truth about government shutdowns should absolutely enrage you. First of all, let me play for you the clips of what Johnson says. Mike Johnson, Speaker Mike Johnson, this is what he says the reason is for the shutdown versus Chuck Schumer saying the reasons for the shutdown. And let me just tell you right now, they're both wrong. And I'm not going to even talk about policy issues, because that actually doesn't matter. Why they've shut down, who's lying, who's saying what, all of this doesn't matter. They're literally robbing millions of Americans of a paycheck, all for just political spectacle. They literally do not have to do this. And let me just explain. Government shutdown, the very first government shutdown was in 1980. 1980, not 1780, not 1880, 1980. The government went 200 years without shutting down ever. Why is that? Now, your first instinct might be incompetence. This government is just now incompetent. Nope, that's not it either. They actually created this whole spectacle in order to make you and me stress out so that we feel like, oh no, and they get to play on this and ride on this while Mike Johnson recesses the House, sends everybody on vacation, says don't come back till October 14th. It doesn't matter if Americans can't buy groceries because they're not getting their paychecks. This is so absolutely infuriating. But here's what Mike Johnson has to say is the reason, and many Americans are believing this, that this is about health care for illegal aliens. That's not it. Okay, I do not. We're having some technical difficulties
today. The American people know it's not beautiful.
But here's Chuck Schumer.
And so they know, our Republican colleagues know that the American people are fully behind us when it comes to lowering costs, but also when it comes to health care and making sure that those premiums don't go way up. And then I spoke to Speaker Johnson directly in the room. I told him, because he can't debate health care, because he knows it's not, the American people are on the side of wanting these increases, even Republicans, I told him to stop making up stories, that too many Republicans are lying through their teeth. They say, oh, the Democrats want undocumented immigrants to get health care, to get the federal dollars of health care. That is utter bull. And they know it. The law prohibits undocumented immigrants from getting payments from Medicare, Medicaid, or the ACA. There's no money, not a penny, of federal dollars that are going there. So why do they bring this up? Because they're afraid to talk about the real issue, which is health care for American citizens, health care for people who need the health care and can't afford these premiums. Let me say it again. Undocumented immigrants cannot receive premium tax credits by law.
Okay, so the Democrats are saying it's not true. It's not about illegal immigrants. Mike Johnson, the clip that I had, which we don't have because we're having some technical difficulties today, he says that, well, it's because they want to give health care to illegal immigrants, and he actually got fact checked directly on air. And because he says, look at the document and read it. And then the newscaster was like, well, I did. And it doesn't actually say that. It doesn't really matter. None of it actually really matters. Let me just go through the history of government shutdowns and why this is so totally and completely infuriating. It doesn't really matter what they're squabbling about. It doesn't actually matter if you agree with Democrats or if you agree with Republicans. None of it actually really even matters. Government shutdowns began in 1980. What happened was in 1974, and actually I have to say, I did my very first video ever when I launched this show, the Kim Iverson Show, on YouTube back in January of 2019. My very first video was on government shutdowns. So it was kind of a blast from the past. here we are, still talking about government shutdowns. We still have not been able to solve this, and it's so infuriating. So what happened was back in 1974, Democrats controlled both chambers. They controlled Congress, but they couldn't by an overwhelming majority. But they couldn't agree with one another about actually abortion rights. Democrats fought amongst themselves about abortions, and it caused them to want to shut down the government. The first early shutdowns were over abortions, and it was Democrats shutting Democrats down because of it. But it all went back to 1974 when Democrats really didn't like what Nixon was doing. President Nixon was He was basically putting embargoes on funds. He was basically not allowing the funds to be distributed, and Congress was upset about this, and they said, "Well, we have to stop him from doing this." That's actually what is the exact word that he was doing? It wasn't an embargo. It was starts with an I. It was the let me just real quick. Impoundment. That's what he was doing. He was impounding funds and not allowing them to be distributed. And Congress says, hey, wait a minute. We have passed the funds and you can't just impound them and not distribute them when we actually passed into law that you have to distribute these. So in 1974, Congress passed the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act, which basically gave Congress more control over the budget process. And if you remember, for a long time, the president would always, when they were running for president, they would say, I'm going to balance the budget. I'm going to deal with the budget. I'm going to balance the budget. And that was like that was their stump speech every time. And they continued to say that. They couldn't get that out of their system, even though Congress effectively took away the power of the budget from the president in 1974. But even then, after 1974, all the way through, I think I remember Bill Clinton saying this in the 90s, I'm going to balance the budget. So I think for 20 years, presidents continued to say that, even though they actually didn't have any effective power doing it anymore because Congress took it away in 1976. So after Congress took away the power of the budget, then then something very strange happened. And I don't know if this was a political maneuver or what the reasoning was for this, but the Attorney General in 1980, this would be Attorney General Civiletti, he put out an opinion. Now, he wasn't a judge, he's just the Attorney General. And he put out an opinion that basically said if Congress cannot pass a new budget, then no one should get paid, basically. Like the government shuts down. And this was the beginning of government shutdowns. It was the opinion of an attorney general who said, well, if you can't pass a budget, then that means certain aspects, non-essential workers, they end up losing pay. Now, you might ask, well, why doesn't Congress lose pay? That should have been the first thing. Well, unfortunately, the 27th Amendment, I believe it is, makes it to where they're not allowed to. The purpose of this amendment was to ensure Congress didn't just give itself raises all the time, like raise after raise after raise. And so it prevents them from also cutting their salaries, even if it's a good idea, like during a government shutdown. I think they should absolutely lose their salaries if they're forcing a bunch of millions of Americans to lose their salaries as well. So to understand this, in 76, Congress basically took the power of the budget away from the president because they didn't like what Nixon was doing with the impoundment. Then the Attorney General in 80, one of his last acts before he got out of there, before Reagan then took over, was he issues this opinion saying, well, then everything shuts down if you can't come to an agreement. Now, previously, before 1980, you might ask, well, what did the government do before then? There was 200 years of the United States before they actually, before 1980. So what did they do? Well, what they did was when they couldn't pass a budget, they just operated on last year's budget, basically automatic continuing resolutions. So automatically, they would just continue funding the government at the current levels, and that's it. And in 1980, Civiletti decides, no, we're not going to do it that way anymore. Now, here's the kicker with this, is that any subsequent attorney general from this point on, now, the attorney general's opinion is not like Supreme Court law, right? It's not like a Supreme Court ruling. So really, any attorney general after Civiletti could have actually reversed this and said, actually, we're just going to go back to doing it the way that we did, and it's just an automatic continuing resolution if Congress cannot come to an agreement. but no attorney general would do it. Now, why is that? Because Congress realized, ooh, this is a nifty tool. Wait a minute, we kind of like shutdowns. We like the posturing. We like the drama. We like it makes our side look good. We're doing something. You know, we're fighting it out. We're doing something for the American people because they know they're not doing anything for the American people. So they pretend like they're doing something, and government shutdowns operates literally solely as theater for politicians to just look like they're doing something. And really, in the blink of an eye, Pam Bondi could say, well, actually, you have to keep the government running at the rate that it was at the same budget it was at. It's just an automatic continuing resolution from now on, no more government shutdowns. But no attorney general wants to do that because everybody in politics has figured out this is a really cool political tool. Let's keep it. All of them, both sides, they've decided to keep it. Now, there have been numerous times when people have actually attempted to change this. Congress has actually, because if the Attorney General doesn't have the guts to go back and reverse Attorney General Civiletti's opinion on this, which was just an opinion of an Attorney General, then Congress actually could act. And what Congress could do is just simply pass a law that says if Congress cannot come to an agreement then on budget, then it's an automatic continuing resolution. The government continues funded. Millions of people do not lose their pay. Millions of people are not furloughed. Active military duty, they're not going to suddenly not have a paycheck, which is about to happen to them right now. They could just literally pass a bill that says we just automatically do continuing resolutions. And some members of Congress have been really nifty about this because people push back and say, well, but then we'll never pass and we'll just keep funding at current levels, which really Republicans should be for because the budget keeps going up and up and up and up. So if you're truly a fiscal Republican, you should just be for funding the government at the current levels indefinitely, right? So, but then Democrats say, well, then that's all they would do. They would just continue funding the government indefinitely at the current levels. And so we can't have that. We just have to shut down because then the pressure of the people not having any money will cause us to come to an agreement. That's their thinking. But in reality, there's another way to put pressure on them without causing the American people to suffer. Why does it have to be the American people who suffer? Why can't it be, I don't know, you? Why can't you, Congress, suffer? And some members of Congress who actually are moral and ethical and understand, they've actually presented such legislation where they say, look, if Congress cannot come to a budget agreement, then everything continues on at the current levels. Nothing shuts down, except Congress doesn't get to go on recess. Congress loses their paycheck. They'd have to write it in to basically amend in a way the 27th Amendment and make it to where congressional members of Congress lose salary or their salary gets put on hold. They basically get furloughed and they lose recess and they should lose a lot of benefits. They should lose a lot of their little perks. But basically they should be in lockdown and not allowed to end session or go to recess without coming to an agreement. But they refuse to do that. They refuse to suffer. They instead require millions of Americans to suffer. So it doesn't matter at all why they're fighting. I don't even pay attention to these stupid shutdowns anymore as to why they're doing it, what they're doing, who's right and who's wrong, because it really doesn't matter. None of it actually matters. They could continue on the government. They choose not to. It's literally their choice. Pam Bondi could reverse the decision right now. Not even a decision, just an opinion. Pam Bondi could reverse the opinion right now. Or members of Congress could actually be, moral and ethical. I know that's a lot to ask. And have them actually say, we should be the ones to suffer if we can't come to an agreement. Why punish millions of Americans? But they don't do that because they're all slime balls. That's why they don't do it. And Speaker Johnson had put everybody on recess, and there's a government shutdown with millions of Americans who aren't getting paid, and they're stressed out about their bills. They're stressed out about everything. And Mike Johnson refuses to bring everybody back from recess. And he said, no, October 14th, we're on vacation until October 14th. Sorry about this. This is infuriating. And this is just a real showcasing of how totally and completely useless Congress has become. Useless, and they just posture, and it's all for political gain, and that's it. They don't care about the American people. And this is the starkest showcasing of this that I can think of. The fact that this is fully and completely, this is one of the rare occasions where this type of drama is genuinely, completely manufactured. 100% manufactured. They don't have to do this. They do it because they think it makes them look good. Meanwhile, Americans suffer. And So that's the truth about shutdowns. And you should really don't get into the battle of, oh, well, the Democrats are trying to give health care to the illegal aliens, or Democrats say, no, it's just the Republicans wanting to raise the rates of health care for all Americans. And we're all fighting for this. Don't fall into any of that bullshit. Don't even get into it. The fact is, they don't have to do a shutdown at all. It doesn't matter who's right. It doesn't matter who's wrong. It doesn't matter why they think they need to shut down the government. They don't have to do it. The country survived 200 years without it. This is just political posturing. It's theater. That's all it is. And they do it for their own gain, and they make Americans suffer for it. And they should all lose their jobs. Every last one of them. The actual punishment should be, if you cannot pass a budget, you're all out. And we get to refresh Congress entirely with new faces next session. That should be the punishment. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.